Welcome back to the Daily Dope. My name is Brandon. I'm your friendly commentator. Basically, I kind of read weed news stories on YouTube, and I throw in my 2 cents. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, maybe hit the subscribe button. Might help you out later on. If you live in Michigan, I do try to keep people up to date with what's going on there. And if you watch my channel, you'll know that I did a video about this new 6% sales tax, or I guess they call it a use tax under the Use Tax Act. 6% use tax that we didn't have to worry about before. All right, this is kind of just a new thing that the Department of Treasury popped off with. Now, I've looked around, and I don't know, I'm not really qualified to know these things or look too much into them, so I really don't know. I'm not a tax expert or a tax lawyer or even a tax, what you'd call like an activist who opposes taxes. I kind of don't like certain taxes here and there, but I'm not totally opposed to the taxation system or whatever, but I do believe in having proper representation when you are taxed. That's basically the whole premise of the Revolutionary War, when you're basically being colonized so that the people that are imposing the tax on you don't hear your voice. They don't hear your grievances. They don't hear you saying, hey, this is bullshit, when something's bullshit. That's what taxation without representation actually means. I know that. So I'm not opposed to taxes, although I'm kind of dubious on some of the legality of certain taxes. I'll say that. I'm not like a total Democrat here. All right. So anyway, I'll just read this real quick for people that don't know anything about this. We'll say last month, the Department of Treasury quietly released an administrative bulletin imposing a 6% tax on medical cannabis transfers between a licensed caregiver and their patients. The so-called use tax would not be paid by the supplier, rather responsibility of the patient. The tax for use and consumption of the property must be reported on Michigan individual tax returns, the directive states. I have the bulletin here. So this is something I didn't do before. I'm going to go ahead and read the pertinent parts that have only to do with patients and caregivers. The patient-caregiver model is something, it's a product of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act that was passed in 2008. 3 million voters voted, 60, I believe, either 4 or 7% approval on this, made it a mandate. And we never talked about, there was never anything about any kind of taxes under the Use Tax Act or anything. So this Revenue Administration Bulletin explains the Marijuana Provisioning Center tax imposed by the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act and the sales and use tax treatment of marijuana and marijuana-derived products sold pursuant to the MMFLA and Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. So basically, the Use Tax Act imposes a 6% tax, quote, for the privilege of using, storing, or consuming tangible personal property in this state. Now, I've heard a lot of people talking about this stuff online, and I kind of agree with the sentiment that as a caregiver, we're really just caregiving for the plants, not the patient, and we're doing them a service. So any kind of money they give us isn't considered like a sale. I guess that's kind of like as simple as I can put it. The Use Tax Acts only impose tax on sale or use of tangible personal property not otherwise exempt under the Use Tax Act and services that are specifically subject to tax. A registered primary caregiver under the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act may receive compensation for costs associated with assisting a registered qualifying patient in the medical use of marijuana. Any such compensation does not constitute the sale of controlled substance. Now, that was right out of the actual MMMA. Therefore, a primary caregiver provision of marijuana and marijuana-derived products in compliance with the MMMA is a non-taxable service and not subject to sales or use tax. However, a qualifying patient that receives marijuana from a primary caregiver is liable for the use tax at a rate of 6% of the purchase price of the marijuana. Use tax should be remitted and reported annually on the qualifying patient's Michigan individual income tax return, Form MI 1040. So they give an example. Example number 2. So Carrie is a caregiver under the MMMA. Carrie the caregiver. Carrie provides marijuana in exchange for $100. Carrie is not liable for sales tax on the $100 since sales by caregiver under the MMMA are non-taxable service. However, Paul is liable for use tax based on the purchase price of the marijuana. Paul should report and remit $6 in use tax for the use and consumption of this property on line 23 of his Michigan individual income tax return. So on this note, one might argue that this property that he's using was his all along. So why should you ever get taxed for using your own property? I don't understand. That's just a little bit something to look into, I guess. Like I said, I'm not qualified to really do anything but criticize this from my own perspective, and I'll let the lawyers haggle this out. We're going to have a situation where what I got to offer to you today is links in the description below to where you can write your local representative that goes to Lansing and does your bidding, and you can also write your senator that represents you in, Lansing once again. So the Use Tax Act exempt for sale of drugs for human use that can only be legally dispensed by prescription. There is the stipulation of that, which is why with prescription drugs in Michigan, there's no tax on them when it comes to sales tax. However, this exemption does not apply to the sale, use, storage, or consumption of marijuana or marijuana-derived products because at the time of the sale, they are not dispensed pursuant to a prescription. Oh boy, here we go. So they're going to use legal word wrangling to act like it's not medicine here. So rather than a qualifying patient presents a registry identification card indicating that a physician has certified that the patient has a debilitating medical condition. So why does that make the materials that the person is using, how is that not medicine? How are those not drugs for human use? And now you're saying that can only be legally dispensed by a prescription. The recommendation from the doctor pretty much is a prescription. That can be argued too, but bottom line is just like they use legal wrangling to say that, I'm sure you can find a lawyer out there somewhere that can legally out-wrangle you. So I don't know if it's maybe just the lawyers aren't motivated to out-wrangle, because basically they make more money off of people getting arrested for marijuana than not. So maybe that's why they don't step up. I don't know. I've often wondered that. All right, so therefore this exemption is inapplicable to the sale and transfer of marijuana for purposes of the MMFLA and the MMMA. Unbelievable. The Use Tax Act also exempts the sale and use of food or food ingredients, which are defined as substances, whether in liquid, concentrated, solid, frozen, dried, or dehydrated form, that are sold for ingesting or chewing by humans and are consumed for their taste or natural value. So that's what you're not allowed to levy a sales tax on in Michigan. Sorry. Food and food ingredients do not include alcoholic beverages and tobacco. Marijuana-infused products are not eligible for this exemption because they are consumed for their medicinal value rather than for their taste or nutrition. I get that, but I don't get that because, it's just discriminating against marijuana. First of all, saying, oh, over here you're like, yeah, it's. Basically, this isn't really medicine. It's not drugs for human use that can be legally dispensed or prescribed. And then right down here, you're like, oh, this isn't food because it's medicine. You're using it for medicine. So I don't know. I mean, anybody that looks at that is just disgusted. There's no other word for it. So what can you do about what can we do about this? Well, there's normal. Michigan Normal says if you want to do something about this, take 5 minutes out of your time. And I did this. This is real easy. It's real quick. Here's what it is. You go in here. If you've already filled one of these out for Michigan Normal, yeah, you can just put your name in here. And then you hit this button here. Now when you get to this part, you basically you can go into this form letter here and put your own message in. And there's two different ones. The first one goes to the actual Treasury Department treasurer. Corey is his name, Treasury Nick Corey. So this one, both of the form letters on the normal forms are the same. So, that's up to you to whether you want to run with that. And then the other form, all right, so let's go to this one. This one, when you fill this one out, basically, like I've already filled that part out, so I could go ahead and just start writing. And when you fill it out, it automatically, addresses this to your reps. I wrote a little extra personal one when I did mine. And yeah, that's all you got to do. It's really easy. The link is in the description below that gets you to the this page here. Whoops. And that's all we can do, tell our reps to do something about this. Basically, this tells them, hey, this is not something was voted on or whatever. This isn't right. Get rid of it. That's all I got on this. I urge anybody that lives in Michigan to go ahead and do this, whether or not you are part of the Michigan medical marijuana program or whatever. Just let your representatives know that we can't do this. All right, there's 300,000 people in the program, and to just suddenly impose some new rule and a tax on all these people is it's just absurd. Really, it's obscene. I'm not sure if it's even legal. I'm sure Michigan Normal is on the case, because a lot of people in Michigan Normal, quite frankly, aren't all about taxation without representation. And like I said, I looked into it, and I'm not qualified to know these things or whatever or comment on them, but I couldn't find anywhere where it says that the Department of Treasury is really authorized to do such unilateral writing of a new tax. And they'll say, oh, it's not a new tax. The Use Tax Act lets us do whatever we want. So I guess it does, or whatever. But if we want to fight back, go here. Link is in the description. Make sure you're subscribed, because if you look around on the internet, all the YouTubers are saying the same thing, and it's happening to me too. Like, I'll gain, every time I lose subscribers and gain subscribers, it's always a net gain. But man, if I do some just simple math in my head, I'm missing hundreds of subscribers because of this shit. So do what we can to try to stay connected. And yeah, go ahead and go to this link and do this shit.